Imagine waking up alone in the dead of night inside a house that never sleeps. The old wooden floorboards creak and groan under the weight of invisible footsteps slowly approaching your bedroom door. A heavy door slams violently somewhere down a long, twisting hallway that shouldn't exist. The temperature drops so sharply that your breath becomes visible in the freezing air. And then the scent hits you. The sweet, cloying smell of lavender perfume slowly overtaken by the sharp, metallic odor of gunpowder and fresh blood. You feel eyes on you from the shadows. Something cold and invisible brushes against your neck. You are not dreaming. This is the Winchester Mystery House, a sprawling 160-room Victorian labyrinth constructed over 38 relentless years without a single day of rest. A house built from unimaginable wealth, crushing personal grief, and what many believe is a blood-soaked curse from thousands of vengeful spirits. In this episode of Horror History Files, we are going deeper than ever before. We will explore every dark corner of this true story. Sarah Winchester's tragic life in exhaustive detail, the nonstop and obsessive construction of the mansion, the bizarre and nightmarish architectural features room by room, dozens of terrifying supernatural encounters reported by servants, visitors, and staff over more than a century, the devastating impact of the 1906 earthquake, and the hauntings that continue to terrify people to this very day. If you are watching this alone at night, you might want to turn on every light in the room, because once we open these files, the house may decide it doesn't want you to leave. Sarah Lockwood Pardee was born in 1839 in New Haven, Connecticut. She grew up in a stable, respectable family and quickly developed a reputation as a highly intelligent, cultured, and talented young woman. She was an accomplished musician and became fluent in several languages. In 1862, at the age of 23, she married William Wirt Winchester, the handsome and wealthy heir to the powerful Winchester Repeating Arms Company. For the first few years, their marriage appeared blessed. The Winchester Company was thriving, largely due to the famous repeating rifle that revolutionized warfare and played a major role in the Civil War and the conquest of the American West. The couple seemed to have everything: wealth, status, and a bright future. But happiness was brutally short-lived. In 1866, Sarah gave birth to their only child, a daughter named Annie. The baby lived only a few short weeks before succumbing to a mysterious childhood illness. The loss completely shattered Sarah. She fell into a deep, prolonged mourning period that lasted for years. Friends and family barely recognized the once vibrant woman. She withdrew from society and struggled with overwhelming grief that seemed to consume her very soul. 15 years later, in 1881, the second devastating blow came. William Wirt Winchester died from tuberculosis at the age of 42. At 42 herself, Sarah was suddenly a widow inheriting an almost incomprehensible fortune, approximately $20 million in cash, plus nearly half the stock in the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. That wealth would be worth several $100 million in today's money. Yet the money brought no comfort or peace. Sarah became increasingly obsessed with the idea that the spirits of every person killed by Winchester rifles were seeking revenge on her family. The guilt over the bloodshed caused by the family business began to consume her completely, leading her down a path of spiritualism and fear that would define the rest of her life. Driven to desperation by grief and paralyzing fear, Sarah reportedly traveled to Boston and consulted a prominent spiritualist medium. What she heard during that seance would change the course of the rest of her life and create one of America's most famous haunted locations. The medium allegedly told her that the Winchester family was under a terrible and unrelenting curse. The ghosts of thousands killed by the Winchester rifle, Union and Confederate soldiers from the Civil War, Native Americans on the frontier, settlers, outlaws, and many others, were vengeful and determined. The deaths of her daughter Annie and husband William were only the first warnings. The spirits would not stop until they claimed Sarah herself. There was only one possible way to survive, the medium said, Sarah must immediately sell her properties in the east, move far west to California, and begin construction on a giant new house. This house must never be completed. It had to be large enough and confusing enough to trap and appease the angry spirits for all eternity. If construction ever stopped, the ghosts would finally take her life. Sarah took the warning with deadly seriousness. In 1884, she purchased an 8-room farmhouse in the Santa Clara Valley near San Jose, California. She named it Llanada Villa. Remodeling began almost immediately, and for the next 38 years, it never stopped for a single day. Sarah hired large teams of carpenters who worked around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. She personally directed every change, often ordering finished rooms torn down and rebuilt the very next day based on what she believed the spirits demanded during her private nightly consultations. The modest farmhouse rapidly grew into a bizarre 7-story Victorian Gothic mansion containing 160 rooms, 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, 47 staircases, and 47 fireplaces. There were no formal blueprints. The design existed only in Sarah's mind and changed constantly. As the house expanded, the supernatural activity became more frequent and more terrifying. Servants reported hearing women screaming in unbearable agony from rooms they knew were locked and empty. Cold, invisible hands would brush across their faces or grab their shoulders while they worked alone. Heavy footsteps followed them through long hallways and stopped the moment they turned around. Doors slammed violently, with no one near them. The temperature in certain rooms would drop so sharply that breath became visible, even on warm California nights. Sarah herself began the terrifying ritual of sleeping in a different bedroom every single night. Convinced the ghosts were actively hunting her through the maze-like corridors, she constructed a special blue room for midnight seances. During these sessions, witnesses claimed the temperature would plummet, objects would move on their own, disembodied voices would growl her name from the shadows or beg for release, and invisible hands would tug at clothing. The house is filled with features that still baffle and terrify visitors today. There is the famous staircase to nowhere that climbs 7 full stories, only to crash directly into a ceiling. There are doors that open onto solid walls or lead outside 2 stories above the ground. Windows are built into floors. Many staircases have unusually low risers. There is the Hall of Fires, with multiple fireplaces kept burning to supposedly warm wandering spirits. Secret passages and hidden rooms exist throughout the mansion. Supernatural encounters became increasingly visceral and frightening. One servant swore he saw a translucent woman in black Victorian mourning dress, weeping in the corner of a room. When he stepped closer, the figure slowly melted into the wall, leaving behind the overpowering stench of decay, mixed with Sarah's favorite lavender perfume. Later, visitors and staff reported seeing bloody handprints appear on glass and then vanish moments later. Hearing children laughing hysterically followed by sudden, suffocating silence. Feeling watched by dozens of invisible eyes, and being physically pushed or grabbed by invisible forces near the infamous door to nowhere. Some woke in the middle of the night to find shadowy figures resembling riflemen with hollow eyes standing at the foot of their beds. The scent of lavender would suddenly fill entire wings of the house, followed by the unmistakable smell of gunpowder and blood. On the morning of April 18, 1906, the great San Francisco earthquake struck with devastating force. The top 3 floors of the Winchester house collapsed in a thunderous roar of wood, glass, and stone. Sarah was reportedly trapped inside for several terrifying hours in total darkness as the mansion shook violently around her. She emerged, convinced the spirits were furious with her. She immediately ordered the destroyed front section permanently sealed off and continued her desperate building in other parts of the house until the day she died. Sarah Winchester died peacefully in her sleep on September 5, 1922, at the age of 83. The moment she passed, all construction stopped instantly. Less than a year later, the house opened to the public. The legends exploded. Since then, thousands of visitors and staff have reported intense paranormal activity, Apparitions of a woman in black, heavy breathing behind them in narrow hallways, objects moving on their own, and vivid nightmares of being chased through endless corridors by shadowy riflemen. The Winchester Mystery House remains one of the most actively haunted locations in America. Whether it was guilt, grief, or something genuinely supernatural, the house still waits. What would you experience if you spent one full night here? Drop your theories in the comments, and I'll see you in the next dark chapter. Sleep well, if you can.